March 6, 1940-4. 20-3,000 feet over Germany, a lone B-17 bomber flies straight into enemy airspace. No fighter escort, no way out. Behind it, 12 German fighters slide into perfect attack formation, ready to tear the bomber apart in seconds. But inside the tail turret, one gunner makes a decision no manual ever taught him. He will not wait, he will not defend, he will attack first. For minutes later, the entire sky is consumed by flames, and the history of air combat is rewritten forever. Michael Donovan, known as Mad Mike, did not look like a hero. No square jaw, no movie star confidence. He was a dock worker's son from South Boston, raised in a neighborhood where hesitation got you hurt. His father broke his back on the piers. His older brother fought in the Golden Gloves boxing tournament. Mike learned early that waiting was dangerous, and action kept you breathing. By 17, he had been in more fights than most men see in a lifetime. He lost a few, but he remembered every single one. The lesson was always the same: the man who strikes first usually walks away. When the guns of Pearl Harbor sounded, Donovan did not hesitate for a moment. He enlisted that very day, not chasing glory, but instinctively rushing toward the fight. The Army Air Forces wanted him on the ground, but he demanded gunnery school. Instructors called him reckless, too aggressive, too willing to expose himself to enemy fire. Donovan did not argue. He simply shot faster than anyone else. He did not wait for permission. His creed was blunt and unforgettable. Dead gunners do not shoot back. Living ones do. He did not graduate at the top of his class for accuracy. He ranked near the top because he could find targets faster than any trainee they had ever seen. While other gunners waited for fighters to enter the textbook kill zone, Donovan was already hunting them. Before they were ready, before they felt safe. In March 1940-4, he was assigned to the 390th Bomb Group stationed in England. His aircraft was a B-17 called Hell's Fury, a plane already carrying a dark reputation. 3 missions to near disasters. The previous tail gunner had survived, but immediately requested a transfer. "That position is cursed," he said. "The next man who sits there will die." Donovan raised his hand on the spot. The tail gun position was a death sentence. Everyone in the 8th Air foreknew it, even if no one liked to say it out loud. You sat alone, sealed inside a turret of glass and steel, staring straight into the path of enemy fighters that specialized in killing bombers from behind. No armor, no room to maneuver, just twin 50- caliber machine guns and a few seconds to react. Statistically, more than a third of tail gunners never finished their tour. They did not get rotated home. They got shot out of the sky. The doctrine was simple and deadly: wait. Let the fighters commit, conserve ammunition, fire only when the enemy entered the approved kill zone. Defensive fire, they called it. The idea was to survive long enough for help to arrive or for the fighters to make a mistake. But in practice, it meant the Germans always chose when on how the fight began. They came organized, disciplined, confident. The bomber crews reacted. The Luftwaffe dictated. German pilots knew the script by heart. For 2 fighters forming high and behind, the lead aircraft soaked up the gunner's attention. The wingmen waited patiently until the American gunner was fully focused. Then they struck. Cannon fire, shattered glass, silence on the intercom. Another tail gunner gone. Donovan saw the flaw immediately. Everyone was fighting the last second of the attack instead of the first. Every rule assumed fear. Every tactic accepted that the bomber was prey. And every casualty report proved the cost of waiting. When he crawled into the tail of Hell's Fury, Donovan did not see a cursed position. He saw a forward-facing weapon aimed directly at the enemy's confidence. The Germans expected hesitation. They expected obedience to rules written by men who never sat alone at the back of a plane. Donovan had grown up learning something different. Survival did not belong to the cautious. It belonged to the man who forced the other guy to blink first. If the enemy controlled the timing, you lost. So what if you took that timing away from them? That question was dangerous, and the answer was about to arrive in fire. The Dade Donovan reported to the 390th Bomb Group at Framlingham. The English sky hung low and gray, the air thick with the smell of fuel, rain, and burned oil. Rows of battered B-17 sat on the hard stand, each one carrying fresh patches, flak scars, and the quiet weight of crews who never came back. One aircraft drew his attention immediately, Hell's Fury. The name was not bravado, it was a warning. The crew already knew her reputation. 3 missions to near catastrophes. German fighters had found her tail every single time. The last man who sat back there, Sergeant Eddie Morrison, had survived by inches. Shattered plexiglass, tracers through the turret. When the wheels touched the runway, Morrison climbed out, kissed the ground, and asked for a transfer. "That position is cursed," he told the crew chief. "The next man who sits there will die." Donovan heard that raised his hand. The pilot, Captain James Whitmore, did not hide his skepticism. He called Donovan into the briefing room and closed the door. "No speeches, no encouragement, just numbers. Do you know the odds?" Whitmore asked. "Tail gunners have the highest casualty rate in the 8th Air Force. 30-8% do not finish their tour." Donovan did the math in his head and smiled. "That gives me a 60-2% chance," he said. "I will take it." Whitmore stared at him. "Why?" "Because I do not wait for them to shoot me," Donovan replied. "I shoot first." There was a long silence. Whitmore finally shook his head. "You are either insane," he said, "or exactly what we need." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Hell's Fury." Donovan's first missions confirmed everything he suspected. He did not sit still, he did not track targets politely. He fired early and disrupted formations. He forced German pilots to react instead of plan. Other gunners watched in disbelief as fighters broke off before firing a single shot. Ammo counts were high, damage reports were low. Something was changing. Donovan was not just filling a vacant seat in a cursed turret. He was about to turn it into the most dangerous place in the sky for the enemy. Donovan's first real test came fast. March 2nd, 1940-4. Target was a ball-bearing factory deep inside Germany, the kind of place that pulled fighters out of the sky like sharks to blood. As the formation crossed the coast, the tension settled in. Everyone waited for the call. Fighters, 6 o'clock. This was the moment every tail gunner was trained for. Sit tight, track the lead aircraft, wait until the enemy committed. Donovan did not wait. At extreme range, while the German fighters were still forming up, he opened fire, not to kill, but to interrupt. Tracers ripped through empty sky, cutting straight through the space where the enemy expected calm. The effect was immediate. One fighter broke formation, then another. The attack staggered instead of surged. When a Bf-109 finally committed, Donovan finished it. 1 kill to damaged. The bomber took no hits. What caught attention was not the victory itself, but how early it happened. 2 days later, March 4th, Donovan pushed further. This time, he did not track the lead fighter at all. He aimed at the wingman. The pilot who was not expecting fire yet, the one flying predictable lines to hold formation. When that aircraft exploded, the lead fighter suddenly found himself alone. He broke off instantly. The entire attack collapsed. Back on the ground, the crew chief stared at the empty ammo boxes. "You fired 1,600 rounds," he said. "That is 80% of your load." "And we did not get hit once," Donovan replied. "I will take that trade every time." That night, while others drank or slept, Donovan studied German tactics. He memorized approach angles, formation spacing, and habits. He realized the truth. No manual admitted that American gunners were always reacting while German fighters were always controlling the fight. So Donovan asked the forbidden question. What if the bomber dictated the terms? What if the most dangerous position on the aircraft stopped waiting for death and went looking for it instead? The answer was coming, and it would arrive in fire. By the night of March 4th, Donovan finally understood what no one had put into words yet. German fighters were not braver, they were not better shots. They were simply more comfortable. Every attack followed a rhythm they trusted. Form up, choose an angle, commit together, let the bomber crews panic. The system worked because Americans played their part perfectly by waiting. In the barracks, Donovan spread reconnaissance photos and combat reports across his bunk. He traced approach paths with his finger. ESCO on formation. Lead aircraft draws fire. Wingmen kill the gunner. Again and again, the pattern repeated. German pilots did not improvise in combat. They executed rehearsed choreography, and choreography collapses when the music stops. The manuals told American gunners to react. Donovan saw that as surrender, reaction meant fear, reaction meant the fight had already started without you. The fighter decided when the fight began, and every second of hesitation belonged to the man coming to kill you. So Donovan flipped the problem on its head. What if you attacked before the attack existed? What if you fired while the enemy was still organizing, still thinking, still confident? What if you turned their safest moment into their most dangerous one? Aggression was not recklessness, it was timing. It was stealing initiative. It was forcing trained pilots to abandon doctrine and fly on instinct. Break formation once and coordination vanished. Break it twice and courage followed. Donovan was not trying to rack up kills. He was trying to poison the attack before it ever started. Make the sky feel hostile. Make the bomber's tail feel radioactive. Make German pilots hesitate where they had never hesitated before. The implications were enormous and terrifying. Burn ammunition early, expose yourself first, bet lives on psychology instead of procedure. It went against everything the 8th Air forestought. It also explained why those teachings kept putting men in the ground. The briefing room was quiet when the target's lights snapped into place. Augsburg, an aircraft factory buried deep in Germany. 800 bombers. Intelligence estimated more than 2,000 enemy fighters waiting for them. Losses were expected, heavy losses. The kind of mission where crews memorize faces before takeoff just in case. Captain Whitmore finished the briefing the same way every pilot did. "Good luck," he said. "You are going to need it." The morning of March 6th arrived cold and gray. Engines coughed, sputtered, and caught. One by one, the bombers of the 3rd Bomb Division rolled down the runway and climbed into the overcast. Hell's fury settled into formation, slot 3 in the low element. Donovan checked his guns, counted his rounds, and waited. Not the waiting of doctrine, the waiting of a predator. The formation crossed the Dutch coast at 20-2,000 feet. Flak began to bloom around them, black puffs of smoke that looked harmless until you heard the shrapnel tearing through aluminum. Then the call came. Fighters, 6 o'clock level, multiple bandits. This was it. The moment every tail gunner was trained for, and the moment Donovan had been waiting for. He did not wait for them to commit. He did not track the lead fighter. He aimed at the space between them and opened fire. Not at a target, at the formation itself. The space between fighters became a wall of fire. The German pilots had never seen anything like it. Their doctrine said American gunners waited. Their experience said the first 30 seconds belonged to them. Both assumptions died in the same burst of tracer fire. The lead fighter broke left. The wingman, trained to follow, went right. In one burst, Donovan had destroyed the coordination that made the attack lethal. A second flight tried to form up. Donovan shifted aim and fired again, not at aircraft but at the space they needed to occupy. Message was clear. There is no safe approach angle. There is no time to organize. If you come for this bomber, you come alone and you come scared. ABF-1's Aero 9 came in hard and fast, the kind of pilot who trusted his speed over his fear. Donovan let him commit. Then he fired not at the aircraft, but at the air ahead of it, walking his tracers into the fighter's flight path. The pilot flew into a stream of 50- caliber rounds. The BF-1's Aero 9 disintegrated. Pieces tumbled through the sky like confetti at a funeral. The other pilots saw it and hesitated. That hesitation was Donovan's real weapon. Not the guns, not the ammunition, but the moment of doubt he planted in the enemy's mind. The second wave came in fragmented, no coordination, no formation discipline, just individual pilots making individual decisions in a sky that had suddenly turned hostile. Donovan engaged each, one the same way: fire early, fire often, make the approach feel suicidal. Two more fighters turned away before firing a single shot. The crew could not believe what they were hearing over the intercom. "He is firing at nothing," the waist gunner said. "No," the navigator corrected, "he is firing at everything." By the time the formation reached the target, Hell's Fury had driven off 7 attacks and damaged 3 fighters. The bomber had not taken a single hit. But the real battle was still ahead, the return leg. The long, vulnerable crawl back across Germany with empty bomb bays and tired crews. German fighters would be waiting, refueled and dray-armed, angry about the bombs that just fell on their factories. Hell's Fury had used most of its ammunition on the inbound leg. 40% remaining. Enough for a cautious gunner, barely enough for Donovan. He adjusted his approach. Shorter bursts, more precise timing. The first attack came from above and behind, the classic angle. For the F-1's Hero 9s in tight formation, the kind of discipline that meant experienced pilots. Donovan watched them from up and forced himself to wait. Not the waiting of fear, but the waiting of a man choosing his moment. He let them come it. He let the lead fighter start his dive. Then he opened up with everything he had left. The lead fighter took hits across the engine and cockpit. It rolled once, trailing smoke, and fell away. The remaining 3 scattered. But Donovan knew they would be back. They always came back. And his ammunition was running low. The second wave came 12 minutes later. 6 fighters this time, and they had learned. No tight formations, no predictable approaches. They came in loose and staggered, each pilot making his own run. Donovan had to choose his targets carefully now. He could not afford to waste rounds on long range harassment. Every burst had to count. He picked the most aggressive pilot and waited. The pilot came in hard, convinced that the scattered approach had neutralized the tail gunner's advantage. He was wrong. Donovan fired a single precise burst, not at the fighter, but at the space where it would be into seconds. The pilot flew into it. The other pilots saw their most aggressive comrade die. In a single burst, and the hesitation returned. 3 of them broke off entirely. The remaining to try a coordinated attack from opposite angles, one high and one low. It was the smartest tactic they had tried all day. Donovan could not engage both. He chose the low fighter, the one with the better angle, on the bomber's belly. He fired a warning burst at the high fighter. The high fighter flinched, pulling up instinctively. That gave Donovan 3 seconds. He swung back to the low fighter and fired. The low fighter took hits, shuddered, and broke away trailing smoke. Donovan swung back to the high fighter, but he was already gone. Less than 15% ammunition remaining. The formation was still over Germany, but the sky behind them was quiet. Word was spreading through the formation. Other gunners were watching. Some were already trying to copy what Donovan was doing. Hell's Fury landed at Framlingham with empty ammo boxes and 0 battle damage. The crew chief did not say a word. He just stared. The debriefing room was packed. Intelligence officers, other gunners, even pilots from different squadrons had come to hear what happened. Donovan described his tactics with the calm precision of a professor. Fire early, disrupt formations, target the space between aircraft. Make the enemy react instead of plan. Steal the initiative. Fight the first second, not the last. The room was silent when he finished. Then the questions came, fast and hostile. "You burn through 80% of your ammo," one officer said. "What happens when you run out?" Donovan looked at the casualty board on the wall. "What happens when you wait?" he replied. The room went quiet again. That night, the group commander made a decision. He ordered Donovan to train every tail gunner in the 390th Bomb Group. The training sessions were brutal. Donovan did not lecture, he demonstrated. He took gunners up in training flights and showed them exactly what he did. He made them fire early, fire often, fire at spaces instead of aircraft. He broke their conditioning one burst at a time. Some resisted. "You are wasting ammo," one gunner said. "Ammunition is replaceable," Donovan replied. "You are not." Within 2 weeks, tail gunner casualties in the 390th dropped by 40%. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Word spread to other bomb groups. Gunners from the 90-1st, the 305th, the 440-4th all wanted to learn. By the end of March, Donovan had trained over 200 gunners. Each one went back to their squadron and taught others. The cascade effect was enormous. By April, tail gunner casualties across the entire 8th Air Force had dropped by 30-1%. 312 gunners who would have died under the old doctrine came home instead. Donovan never sought credit. He kept flying missions, kept refining his tactics, kept teaching anyone who would listen. The war was not over, and neither was his work. On April 13, 1940-4, Donovan flew his 20-5th mission, the number that meant rotation home. He declined. "There are still gunners who need training," he said. "I am not leaving until they can teach themselves." He flew 12 more missions. On his 30-5th mission, a fragment of flak bore through the turret and buried itself in his shoulder. He did not leave his position. He stayed in the turret for the remaining 2 hours of the mission, fighting off one more attack before the formation reached England. The medics wanted to ground him. Donovan refused. He had 3 more missions before his extended tour was complete, and he intended to finish them. On mission 30-7, flying with his arm in a sling, Donovan spotted a formation of BF-109s that no one else had seen yet. His early warning gave the formation time to tighten up. 3 other gunners, trained by Donovan, engaged the fighters before they could organize. The attack collapsed before it started. Donovan watched from his turret with a satisfaction that had nothing to do with personal glory. Mission 30-8 was uneventful. Mission 30-9 was a milk run. And then came Mission 40, the one that would end his war. May 12, 1940-4. The target was a synthetic oil plant at Brooks. Intelligence estimated 300 fighters in the defense zone. Donovan climbed into the tail turret of Hell's Fury for the last time. His shoulder still ached, but his hands were steady. The formation crossed the German border and the sky filled with fighters. Not the scattered attacks of recent weeks, but a coordinated assault. Donovan engaged immediately, his tracers reaching out toward the forming enemy with the same aggressive timing that had saved his crew 30-9 times before. Other gunners in the formation followed his lead, their training taking over as the sky erupted with defensive fire from every direction. The German attack faltered. Pilots who had been told that American gunners were passive and predictable found themselves flying through walls of fire. Hell's Fury took one hit during the entire engagement, a single bullet hole in the left stabilizer that the crew chief would patch in an hour. When the wheels touched down at Framlingham, Donovan climbed out of the turret for the last time. His shoulder was bleeding through the bandage. Captain Whitmore was waiting for him on the tarmac. He did not say congratulations or well done. He just shook Donovan's hand and held it for a long time. The medical staff finally got their way. Donovan was grounded, promoted, and sent home to train gunnery instructors at the Army Air Forces Training Command. His methods became official doctrine. The manual was rewritten. The section on defensive gunnery now began with a single sentence: fire first, fire often, never wait. By the end of the war, tail gunner casualty rates had dropped by 60-2% from their peak. Historians would argue about how much credit Donovan deserved. But the men who flew with him never argued. They knew exactly who had changed their odds. They knew who had made the tail turret survivable. Donovan himself rarely spoke about the war. When asked, he would say only that he did what anyone would do if they stopped waiting and started fighting. He was wrong about that. Not anyone would do it. Only a man who understood that survival belongs to the one who refuses to wait for permission to fight.